Well, it may well be a first for democratic South Africa, but in America, disagreements over funding legislation often threaten to shut down a government. In fact, since February last year, there have been no less than 10 funding shutdowns. To tell us more about this, we are joined now by our U.S. correspondent, Simon Marks. Simon, welcome back. Twice in 2 days. First, has there been any reaction so far from the U.S. to this development?
Always lovely to see you, Vuyo. No, there's been no reaction from the US yet, but that's partly because, of course, US attention is so very heavily focused at the moment on two things. One, the crisis in Ukraine and President Trump's efforts to resolve it by warming up the relationship between Washington and Russia. But two, the possibility of a government shutdown here in the United States. There is another standoff taking place on Capitol Hill. No agreement yet about how to keep the government open, the possibility of our own government shutdown here in the United States within the next couple of weeks. Brinksmanship once again underway on Capitol Hill. And while all of this, of course, is new for South Africa, it is old hat here in the United States. I mean, I have been here through so many government shutdowns, actual government shutdowns. The longest one was back in late 2018, early 2019. The federal government closed for 35 days. 380,000 civil servants were placed on furlough. Attractions like the museums here in Washington, D.C., the National Zoo, various other attractions across the country shut down to the public because staff were told they needed to stay home until funding was restored to the government. And it's always a seismic moment in American politics when it happens. It just happens on a pretty regular basis. And it's symptomatic of the absolute polarization in politics here now, the inability of Democrats and Republicans ever to agree on anything, and often not even to agree among themselves about things, that we now see these shutdowns here on a continuing basis. I mean, as you know, there's always another one just around the corner.
Well, virgin territory for South African politicians, but as you just so eloquently put it, I mean, it's something Americans have become accustomed to. But Simon, I'm sure a lot of people will be keen to know what or how Americans then what they do to try and find one another, because that's exactly what the ANC and the DA in the main, together with their 8 other partners, would have to do over the next couple of weeks.
Well, it's all about horse trading, isn't it? It's all about meetings in what used to be the smoke-filled rooms of Capitol Hill. They're now, of course, the smoke-free rooms of Capitol Hill. But it's about meetings within political parties to unify positions. Remember that neither the Republicans nor the Democrats here are monolithic. There are left-wing factions within the Democratic Party, more conservative-leaning factions within the Democratic Party. The Republican Party riven with disagreement on Capitol Hill, even between members of the Republican Party in the House of Representatives, who tend to be, certainly have tended in the last few years, to be much more radical and much more pro-Donald Trump than some of the more seasoned veterans in the Republican Party in the United States Senate. Although, as time has passed, I would say this new United States Senate is much more minded to back Donald Trump's wing of the Republican Party than its predecessors. So the big two political parties, and I suppose that's still the biggest distinction between our situation here and the one that you're dealing with in South Africa. We don't have a plethora of parties in our equivalent of Parliament, the two chambers of Congress. We got two major parties and the occasional floating vote from independents that sit in the middle. Those political parties have to try and agree their own positions on contentious issues in the budgets that are presented to them. The cause of the shutdown in 2018-2019 was COVID-19 funding, to which, of course, many Republicans were opposed at the time. And then the two parties together have to try and forge a way in a very tightly balanced House of Representatives and the Senate. Remember that the Republican majorities in both chambers now are very, very small. So the White House and Republican leadership can only afford to lose less than a handful of votes in the Senate and about a handful in the United States Senate. So very often they'll need Democratic support to bring these things across the line. So it is a game of brinksmanship, and often it can go on for a very long time. I mean, in addition to that shutdown of 35 days, I think the second longest shutdown was 19 or 20 days. It can be hugely destabilizing for this country, and particularly, of course, destabilizing for all of those government employees that get told they're not going to get paid until the shutdown is over. So in 2018, 2019, they had to weather a month without money before their next paycheck reflected not just the new month of operation, but the money that they should have got for the month when they were on furlough.
Horse trading, brinkmanship, we shall see how things pan out here in South Africa, in what is, of course, a first for us, Simon Max. And there are those who say or believe that what happened today in this country isn't necessarily a bad thing. But